Good evening. Welcome. My name is Catherine Hecht. I am the Executive Director of the Alexander Valley Film Society, and I am very pleased to welcome you to the 7th Annual Alexander Valley Film Festival. Tonight, part of the festival, something that we are just exquisitely excited to be able to bring to our community, and I hope you got some pizza to celebrate. We have tonight the filmmakers and the subjects from the Kincade Fire and Last Days at Paradise High. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to start with our land acknowledgement, which is new for the Film Society and really important for us to share with you. The Film Society recognizes that we are on unceded lands of the Coast Miwok, Pomo, and Wapo. We respectfully acknowledge the Indigenous people who have lived here for thousands of years and who continue to contribute in meaningful ways to their communities and our society as a whole. Our shared history includes the genocide, forced removal, and ethnic cleansing of Indigenous people. AVFS is committed to centering Indigenous voices and stories to recognize the past and celebrate the resiliency of Native people and their culture. Our deepest thanks go to Nikki Myers-Lim and the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center, and Clint McKay from the Pepperwood Preserve for their assistance with this acknowledgement. Please visit our website to learn more at avfilmsociety.org/equity. Okay, so a couple of housekeeping items for you today. We are across all of the Film Society social media channels. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And I believe some of our guests have also shared the stream as well. So when you comment on social media, all of the comments will aggregate in my screen. I'll keep an eye on them. And if we have time at the end, I'll float them past our panelists for their response. A reminder that no racism, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, or hate speech will be tolerated. This is a safe space for everyone to celebrate film, artists, and the stories they tell. And I think that's about it in terms of housekeeping, although I will tell you that thus far in the festival, the Kincade Fire is by far our most watched film. I believe we've had more than 120 views so far of that one particular film. So it's really exciting to not only have our filmmakers here today, but the subjects as well. So let's get started by welcoming Leslie Simmons, Kent Porter, Chief Hine, Chief Tuberville, and Derek Knowles. Welcome, everyone. It's really good to see you here.
Thanks, Catherine.
So I want to just start by saying we've got, so Derek here, and I've asked Derek and Leslie to indicate which films that they are representing tonight. Derek is here with the short Last Days at Paradise High. Leslie is here with the Kincade Fire. And Leslie, would you introduce us to our other three distinguished guests?
Yeah, of course. The three folks we have here are featured in our film. We have Kent Porter, who is a senior journalist, photojournalist at the Press Democrat. We have Chief Marshall Tuberville, who is the chief at Northern Sonoma County Fire District, and Chief Mark Hine, who is the chief at Sonoma County Fire District, which represents the area in Windsor and surrounding unincorporated areas, I believe.
Correct.
Good job. Good job. So welcome, everyone. We were talking right before the broadcast. I could hear some of the radio chatter there in the background. It sounds like fire season is unfortunately nigh upon us. But let's kick off our conversation a little bit on the art side. Leslie, can you give us a little bit of the history of how the project came into your hands and where the genesis of the project came from?
Sure. Well, our company, we produce videos and films locally here in Sonoma County. And so we have worked with the Northern Sonoma County Fire District on previous projects, mostly focused on educating the community around fire safety, prevention, that sort of thing. So we've done a series with them. And so they approached us about a year ago because they had been awarded a grant and they wanted to use those funds to help educate the community and keep the story alive so that people understood what was going on here in Northern California during where we are today. So, we were excited to learn about that project since we're local and we are impacted by these fires ourselves. So we were really eager to work on this project and help share the story about what we went through, and actually the really heroic efforts that our firefighting crew and others did to help make this have the least impact in our community as far as loss of life and injuries. So I think it was a really unique approach that we had here.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And Derek, let's shift over to you for a second. Can you tell us where the idea came from for Last Days?
Sure. Yeah, so my film is, about the Camp Fire in 2018 that affected primarily the town of Paradise, California, and it's actually this sort of the second fire backdrop sort of documentary that I've made. My mom lives in the town of Sonoma, and my film before that had been sort of another kind of character study of some residents in the aftermath of the 2017 fires. And yeah, it's, as someone who's more or less a resident of Sonoma County, it's hard to keep track at this point of like which fire is which. But yeah, so my film sort of evolved out of my own experiences with the 17 fires and making a film about the various sort of subtle ways that climate disaster affects us. You can have your house burned down, and that certainly is a sort of direct impact. But I think as everyone on this chat knows, there's other more nuanced ways that that these events are affecting people's lives, and that's kind of what I guess my films have attempted to show. And my project now is kind of from the perspective of high school seniors and what it's like to come of age, at a time when we're living in the maw of climate change. So that's what I did.
The maw of climate change. Well said. Yeah. And yet for you on the panel, I've had the privilege of talking to Leslie a little bit about this, but for you on the panel and the folks who are with us tonight, one of the reasons we bridged these two films was not only that they center on fire and local fire disasters, but the fact that they give the breadth and scope of the experience from the immediate trauma, from the fire response to the trauma of the people who are affected by the fire, the resiliency needed to plan ahead, and the mental health component of the long-term effects and how our community is dealing with these things. And unfortunately, Michael, the clinical psychologist who we've had with us before, wasn't able to join us at the last minute. And that mental health component is something that I think a lot of us are acutely aware of and invested in, and especially as our community has reeled time and time again from these circumstances. So just to now pull in another little bridge, Kent. Personal, as I mentioned before, I'm a huge fan, but you have also told the story visually for so many in this community of what it's like to be inside the fire zone, toe to toe with the fire, the progress, the retreats. Can you tell us a little bit about how your career is tied to these disaster events? In what ways it's tied to them?
Excuse me. Thank you for having me on, Leslie, Catherine. Nice to see you all. I've always been kind of into the environment. Our daily life is really structured around weather. A lot of us, and especially me, and my news coverage of what I do is pretty much like that every day. I didn't really start thinking about it until 2012 when we started going into the drought. And then I started noticing these changes that started rapidly appearing. A little background, I grew up in Lake County. I remember the drought of 1976 and 77. Our boat was on mud in Clear Lake. It was -3 on the Rumsey scale. And so I'm seeing these markers now, especially this year. I'm seeing the markers of 2012, 2013, 2014 earlier this year than I've seen before. So in 2015, when we hit the Valley Fire, I believe, my personal opinion is that's when everything started to tip. That's when you really saw the climate change tip on the North Coast. And I, you know, people will debate whether there's climate change or not, but something's different. Our fires are hotter, faster, they're more destructive. Of course, there's a lot more billing going on in the wildland. So basically, my life has really taken a turn for that. My professional life has really taken a turn for that direction. There's so many stories to tell. And during the firestorms, the responsibility to communicate with people, especially now with social media, is very strong with me. That's how I do. And I know a lot of people and get along with them, and they give me the access, and I have to take advantage of that access and make sure that I get the right stuff out there. It's just a progression of how my career has gone. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it really has gone that way, really very much.
When did you first become intimately involved with the first responder protocols and ending up on the first lines as you have?
Years ago, when I first got here, it was 1987 when I first got here. My first fire that summer was with Steve Baxman out in Monte Rio, and I showed up to a fire without any gear. I didn't have a helmet, didn't have Nomex, nothing. And he promptly pulled me aside. He says, "This is what you need if you're going to cover my fires." So he gave me a set of Nomex. He gave me a helmet. He loaned them to me. He didn't give them to me. He loaned them to me. And so from that moment on, I started doing fire photography. And my first big campaign fire was the Fouts complex, Mendocino complex up in the Mendocino National Forest. And that was in September 1987. That was after a pretty large lightning outbreak that we had all over the North Coast. That was my first big fire. And so it's just kind of gone that way over my career. And in 1992, I realized that the photographers were getting closer and closer to the action. So I developed a program at the Press Democrat to outfit all the photographers with all the gear, proper training, everything that the firefighters wear, we wear, except we don't have, the hose packs and the McLeods and the Pulaskis. We carry cameras, so we're pretty safe. And just recently, we're all we have almost all the reporters are going to be outfitted in the newsroom with fire gear. So it's a progression of decades. And that's how fire seasons have gone. We used to fight over campaign fires. Who was going to get to go to a campaign fire? We don't do that anymore. We all cover the campaign fires because there's 4 or 5 a year.
Wow. I want to get to the technical components that, Leslie, you all captured in the film, some of the modeling that's just super impressive and sophisticated. But before we get there, I now want to tie Kent back to our 2 chiefs who are here. The first thing in this film that is the most striking are those initial calls, and your voices do not change at all. Just complete calm, assuredness, confidence. I think the question on everyone's mind is, have you always been this way?
Well, I'll take that one. I would say no, probably not. But for me, this is my 40th year in this profession. And so I've seen a lot in my career, experienced a lot on the front lines and behind the scenes. But one of the things that's important for the roles that Marshall and I have when we get involved in the early stages of these rapidly escalating incidents, we have to set the tone for the rest of our emergency responders. So it's really important that we come across with a very strong command presence, is the term we use. Make sure that everybody knows we are going to get through this, both for our first responders and for the communities that are in harm's way. We are going to get through this. And we are here to help lead everybody through that piece of it. So that tone that you referred to is something that we have worked hard on throughout the majority of our careers, especially in leadership positions. And that's why.
Was there a moment for you, Chief Turberville, when it changed for you, where it felt more natural or you felt more confident, like when the practice finally led to the ownership of the skills? Or was it just gradual? Can you tell us about that?
I would say it was just gradual. The main point being is if we're really excited or not thinking clearly, then we're not making good decisions. And then people are sensing our sense of, inability to control our emotions. So it's something that, I still get excited on fires, but you just got to learn to control that. Just like speaking in front of a group on a panel discussion that's posted online, you just got to learn to stay calm and think about what you're going to say. And the benefit we have is we get to go to fires, so we get to see things that most ordinary people don't get to see. Now, these fires are burning more, they're burning bigger. So that's a change, and you just got to learn to stay calm. It's still the same fundamentals. These fires for me now are getting a little more personal because they're threatening our family, our homes. It's kind of been that, more often than not, we're going to another county, another community, and it was personal for them, but now it's in our own backyard. And that's when it gets really hard, when I have to tell my family, hey, you're going to have to evacuate or you got to leave. And we're fielding personal phone calls. And I was with Chief Gosner during the Tubbs fire, the same thing with him. And so that's what makes it then hard, is we do have emotional attachment to our communities, to our areas, and then it is affecting our families directly as well. So that's always hard, but we still nonetheless try to remain calm and collected and provide good leadership.
Excellent. My gosh, it really shows. So can you take us through, not the Kincade Fire itself, but in particular, can you take us through some of the technology that seemed to really emerge during that particular response? Sorry, I said particular like 8 times, but the modeling itself was so impressive, and it helped you make informed decisions that saved a lot of lives.
So I'll start it off, and I'll kick it over to Chief Hine, because he was actually at the incident command post at the Santa Rosa Fairgrounds, Sonoma County Fairgrounds. But one of my qualifications I also have is what's called an FBAN, which is a fire behavior analyst. So I'm familiar with what was occurring in incident base while I was out on the fire. So wildland fire, and you've heard me probably say this before, is based upon fuels, weather, and topography. So in the incident base was an incident meteorologist from the National Weather Service. So that is, very specific, focused weather analysis of what's going to happen in the fire and the surrounding area. So we had, just in review, we had the initial red flag warning that Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And then we had the stronger, more significant red flag wind event. I'll say early Sunday morning, but it was predicted to be late Saturday night. That's what then pushed the fire towards Windsor. And then there was actually a third red flag on that Tuesday. So every one of those events and the days in between, knowing that weather, there was that fire behavior analyst then, doing the computer modeling. And it's the best math, the best science out there about how fast the fire is going to spread, what's the spotting distance, what's called the probability of ignition, and giving everyone a heads up. And ultimately, what you saw in the video, and most importantly, is what's the potential of how far this fire is going to spread. And so that then supported the evacuations. It also was where firefighters were allocated or assigned or in staging. But that specific point about where's it going to go, what's the potential, how far is this fire going to get pushed by the wind, because wind is the most dominant driver of fire behavior. So that modeling, that science, the exact times of where the fire would make it to exact points, it wasn't exactly precise, but it is the best available out there. And being that those folks were in the incident command post, they were talking straight to the people that were in charge, people making decisions. So we had the best knowledge in the best location, providing the best advice. And that's what then, 2017, there was a loss of life. 2019, no loss of life. 2020, same thing, no loss of life. So that is number one. And so that all came together, and it was highlighted in the film. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Hine.
Yeah, I think Chief Turbo did a great job with that. So one of my primary places during the early days of the Kincade Fire was at the incident base, or the incident command post at the fairgrounds. I spent a lot of time in a very large tent with a map on a table the size of a large living room. And the sheriff's department, myself, the CAL FIRE incident management team, a whole bunch of folks trying to make very careful, very skillful, and very informed decisions about evacuations. We do not take evacuations lightly by any means. We know the impact on individuals. We know the impact on families. We know the impact on the community when we have to order you to leave. We only do so if we really feel that your life is in imminent jeopardy if you stay. So to make those decisions, we use a variety of tools. We use the highest technologically advanced software programs that can help predict fire spread given current fuel, weather, and topography where this fire is burning, the lay of the land, in other words. And I think you really saw that all come together in how evacuations were performed in the early days of the Kincade Fire, starting with at the perimeter of the fire and then getting way ahead of it. And, you know, one of those items that I always refer to in the Kincade Fire was data and analysis and weather predictions told us that if that fire got to Highway 101, it had a high propensity to get over the highway and run all the way to the coast. And that is a mind-baffling probability when you're looking at a map and the amount of people that you have to move in a short period of time on only a couple ways in and out of the west part of Sonoma County. But knowing that ahead of time was valuable, because then what we do at the Incident Command Post is we develop trigger points, and we say, if it gets to this point, we already have a plan to do X. So a lot of evacuation work on the Kincade Fire was done highly successfully because of that intel and getting ahead of it. And I know you saw that repeated in the Glass Fire of last year as well, because when that impacted Sonoma County, it came in at night and caused the same kind of devastation. So I think a critical benchmark of measuring success is what Marshall just alluded to. We've had no fatalities in these last couple of major incidents. And I think that's because the technology and the data-driven decisions that are being made by the incident commanders is highly effective. And people have learned, unfortunately, through trial and tribulation here in the fires, to heed evacuation warnings. And you know, as fire service leaders, I can't state enough how critical that is to heed those warnings and let us get in and protect your properties.
Well said. And I have one more question about this. I want to put a fine point on this. Can you explain the differences between the technology that was available to you and developed in 2017 versus what we saw in the Kincade Fire response? It seemed like it made quite a leap.
It really has been. Marshall, I'll turn that to you because I think you have a better handle on that as a fire behavior analyst. But technology is playing an ever increasing role in our world, and we're constantly seeking that next greatest tool out there.
Thank you. Yeah, I would summarize the changes between 2019 in two things. The science, the formulas have continued to progress and get more refined, and then our ability to get more real-time data, less of a delay. So those two things combined give us just more precision. So just refining the modeling, recognizing the more extreme fire behavior we've had since 2015, as Kent alluded to, and then just we're getting more weather stations, more information being fed in, and that then helps either confirm what we're seeing or provide more and more accuracy. So those are the two factors that change between those 2 years.
So yeah, super significant. And I want to switch gears just a little bit to talk about what's happening on the ground for the people in the middle of the response, not the responders, but the folks who are experiencing evacuation, packing, not packing, and then this immediate of evacuation and the weeks and the first few months that follow. The years to come is something separate. But Derek, you had incredible access to those kiddos in Paradise and caught them and bore witness in such a lovely, caring way of really giving them space to express this profound grief that was hard to articulate, but it just, came in waves for them. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like from an artistic perspective, from the filmmaker's perspective, to hold space for those things and not interfere and let them come and then shape a story around those experiences?
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's, while I haven't been able to see Leslie's film yet, I'm really looking forward to it. I think, as I think Kent alluded to, there are just the world is full of stories, obviously, and there are a lot of fire stories to tell. So even hearing the chiefs talk about their experience is very different from like a different perspective than kind of like what my films have looked at, which has been the kind of the ripple effect after their work is done, basically. And it's interesting even for me to hear about kind of like the way that they measure success. And I'm glad they do measure success and kind of like, well, how many people are living or dying. but to kind of get into the area that I've explored a little bit more, it's like, well, that's kind of the first level, but then we have to live with that, right? And it's, you know, maybe death by 1,000 paper cuts in some ways, and it's really sad, obviously, when you see that happen to 18-year-old kids. You know, part of the reason I was interested in telling this story was, and after I made this my first film on fires, I was really kind of, I was a little disillusioned, shall we say, with just the kind of a lot of the fire stories that I was being exposed to out in the world, and I would really actually think I met Kent very briefly working in the Sonoma Town Plaza. He was doing his own work, and I'm really curious to hear kind of his perspective. And but I was disenchanted, I guess, with kind of like the mainstream media coverage in general, and I think that's just because they have to wear a different hat. And having gone through an experience like that, you know, some of my own trauma was sort of unleashed when I would see, you know, a local news story, or even, you know, a national story where someone would parachute into an area. It's just the reality of kind of like that dynamic where you have to get the image, you have to get a soundbite, and then you have to leave. And, you know, I think that is the role of longer form storytelling. You know, and Paradise, candidly, was a bit of a zoo. Like the school itself had relocated down to Chico, as had most of the community, about 30 minutes away from Paradise, which more or less no longer existed. I mean, it really looked like a bomb had gone off. And the school itself was in an airport office building, which had its own like bizarre, surreal quality to it. And but there were I was one of there were several camera crews at any given point wandering through the halls, and it added to this surreal quality of being there. And it was something actually I really struggled with. I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to induce more trauma. A lot of people didn't want to have to revisit what they had been through. I mean, like walking into school every day and being like in an office building was always a reminder of what they had been through. So this is a long way of saying that the only way that I was able to justify making the film that I made, I think, was having the buy-in of the students and the people we worked with. And, you know, I was sleeping on their floors. The families were incredibly kind to sort of take us, Emily, my co-director, and I in. And I think that's because, in a way, they saw the value in a sort of slower approach and being able to kind of tell a story that wasn't really about the fire so much as it was about their experiences, just the difficulty of being 18 years old and struggling with whether to leave home, to stay at home, and then that being amplified by what had just happened to their town. So I don't know, I guess. I think it's just, I don't really know how we pulled it off, if we pulled it off. I still kind of struggle with it. But I don't know. I'm glad that the film, I will say, exists in conversation with like other films like Leslie's, because and Kent's work, and then, you know, the work of fire departments, because there are just so many facets to these experiences, and you know, it seems like they're going to be kind of just a part of living in you know, in the West.
Yeah. I really did think that. Echo. Are you getting an echo?
I think it went away.
Okay. Derek, one of the things that I thought was one of the more poignant parts of your film was when a couple of the kids were able to articulate, I mean, we had microphones in our face and cameras in our face, and it was just constant. And it's interesting, the documentaries that have come out of Paradise, one notably, Ron Howard. So Ron Howard has had his, and at the same time, there was another full-length feature documentary that came out by someone who was from Paradise. And the difference in the two stories was so stark. One much more intimate, nuanced, nowhere near the same production values, but connecting with people in a way that was authentic and really making space for them. And for what it's worth, I hear you about your conflict in that, but I also think it's really important that you gave it a little air and gave it some room to breathe and be captured like that. And so going back to Kent, you've got one foot in both camps. So you are not only toe-to-toe with fires, but you've got incredible footage and records now of people fighting to protect their homes and fleeing their homes. Can you tell us a little bit about managing your experience in that and managing your own feelings and how to move that forward?
Part of my job is to just kind of just disconnect from what's going on. The camera they always say it kind of acts as a shield. It really doesn't. It adds up over time. I know that the Valley Fire really affected me big time because it's where I grew up, and I knew a lot of people that lost their homes. And at that time, I didn't think that there would be another fire like that. I knew there would be big fires, but nothing like that. And then we went to 2016 and had the Clayton Fire. And we had the Tubbs Fire. Now, I remember when I got into this, I remember how hard firefighters work. I mean, when you go into a fire and the flames are 150 feet up in the air and there's, pine trees that are torching out and chemise that's going off and there's, brush is sheeting, the fire is sheeting across the ground, and you don't realize how hazard that is. And people that actually run into the flames, I have all the respect in the world for them. It's thankless, although they love what they do. It's thankless. They're trying to protect their community, and part of being a community journalist is trying to show what people do. It's our community. We all knew people that lived in Coffee Park, Fountain Grove. We all know people that live on the Nuns Fire when they had the Nuns Fire, and we knew people in the Kincade Fire and the Walbridge Fire. You can name them after one after another. And what I come back down to is the humanity of the people that live here. Now, that stand that was made in Windsor, Mark, was amazing. I don't know if we'd had if we'd had fires, we'd had several fires going on in Tubbs, like the Tubbs that night. I'm not sure. I don't know what would happen to Foothill, but we had this amazing group of strike teams that came in, and they were there immediately, within 5 minutes when that fire moved over into Foothill. What a gutsy call that was. I mean, just all those firefighters out there. And then you start to realize is that we're all kind of in this together. We all have, this wave has undulated in good ways and in bad ways. We've had things that we've had to study with our warning systems. We've kept our nose to the grindstone to make this better. And the underlying factor here is that we all live here, and we all have to get along and really figure this out for the better of our communities. And for me, it's definitely person. I have a family in the fire service, and it's hard to be out there when you know that your son is out there doing the same thing, and hoping that he's safe and seeing what he's seeing. And what I'm seeing is it blows me away. I'm not prepared for that. I've gotten used to it, but there's no way I could do what firefighters do. There's absolutely no way. I just record what they do. It's a privilege to record how firefighters do their job and the amazing amount of dedication that goes in to what they do. I mean, it's sometimes I'm speechless about it, but the Kincade Fire, that stand in Windsor was just phenomenal. I mean, really was. And that night that I saw Marshall up on the hill, up in the geysers, and I did that little Twitter video of him, saying evacuate. The intensity in Marshall's, he was very calm and very collected, but there was an intensity in Marshall's eyes that, it's unmistakable. We do not want to mess around with this fire. And people heeded that. I thought it was remarkable how media comes together, press comes together to help out a community. And I agree with you, Derek, about, you know, people jumping in, parachuting in. You know, it'd be like me going down to San Francisco to cover an earthquake when I don't live down there. You know, I can't do it properly. I don't live there. This is our community. We live here, and we need to take care of it. And that's how I look at my journalism, is that I have a responsibility to tell a story, the truthful story, the in-depth story, and all the writers and photographers at the Press-Democrat feel the same way. Absolutely, yeah. That's kind of roundabout way. That's like, I care for my community. I care about the people that I work with, and the firefighters, and, you know, people that protect us. We're all in the same boat.
Well said. Leslie, I know you have you and I share a lot of the same feelings. You know, we do it, and we serve our communities in different ways. I love seeing you back working in film and telling visual stories like this. What was something, having been through the fire yourself, as we have, what was something that surprised you in the film that you didn't know was going on while you were experiencing it?
That's a good question. You know, it is really interesting because, you know, I think, you know, as filmmakers, you know, right, every time there's a fire, like James and I sort of were like, oh, you know, James, should you go out and film it, right? Like, should we capture footage of this? Or, you know, kind of, you have that sort of pull. And, you know, usually it comes, you know, we sort of settle that, you know, we're all in chaos. And so it's kind of this weird balance, you know, you kind of feel like, you know, because we're like, are we gonna have to evacuate? You know, what are we doing? So there's like that personal thing. I don't know, you know, when I was writing the piece, you know, here's the story. I mean, when our goal was to get this film out at the anniversary of the Kincade Fire, which was last October. We missed it. We missed that goal. But part of that reason was that when I was writing this film, it was August, you know, and I remember sitting here listening and, you know, logging all my footage and listening to the transcripts and listening to the 911 calls. And as I was doing that, I was listening to Marshall in my ear during the Wallbridge fire. You know, we were literally, you know, they were literally fighting a fire at the same time as we were writing about this fire that had just happened. And I don't know, I mean, I always think there's a line that Chief Hines says in the film where he says, you know, God forbid that we're going to have another fire in Sonoma County in our lifetime or something like that. And it's like, and I'm sitting there editing this film, and like, there is literally a fire of the same scope happening within 10 months, you know, and it's just, for me, that was like really heartbreaking. I mean, I was literally crying. I was sitting here writing and crying and just feeling so broken, you know, and yeah, we're all living here, and, you know, I really, I don't know, you know, just, and interviewing the couple subjects that we did that were impacted by the fire was, you know, John Lilienthal works for the fire service, and, you know, his family lost their home, and, you know, it's just a painful place to be. And so I think, you know, what I learned, I mean, it was kind of cool to see it all unfold, because, you know, living in Cloverdale, we had our little bubble. We were sort of like we were holding lots of people who had evacuated. You know, we hadn't evacuated our house during that fire. And so I don't know, it was interesting to hear what was going on in the southern part, you know, learning more about that Windsor stand, hearing Chief Boaz in Healdsburg talk about his fears, you know, about the fire coming up over Fitch Mountain, you know, seeing all these tactical decisions, and, you know, hearing, you know, all those elements that went into the response was really eye-opening for me. Just that, like Supervisor Gore says, you know, this was not a gut check moment. This was really like based on empirical evidence. And, you know, I think I did learn a lot about that. And one of the things I always tell these fire people, fire chiefs and everything is, you know, I never thought that weather was going to have to be something that firefighters need to understand. I guess I never knew that, right? And so learning that weather is part of this is just been a new development for me in my own, you know, learning.
So before we get to the present and what you all are in the middle of preparing for, and how we need to encourage each other to, stay alert and get ready. I do want to touch on mental health, even though Michael's not here. I open it up. Chief Tuberville, Chief Hine, how are you talking to your folks about this? What kind of practices are in place for folks to be taking care of themselves, for their families to be getting a break? I mean, it's obviously, we're asking a lot of you guys every time you go out. What are those conversations like?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking the question, Catherine. This is a huge deal in our industry right now. It is a huge concern for Marshall and I as fire chiefs. You have to remember that this is a county that's experienced these large, devastating conflagrations for multiple years in a row now, and many of the firefighters on duty today were at the front lines of every one of those. So irregardless of what your connection is to the Kincade Fire, for example, whether you saw it from a distance, you watched it from another state, you were on the front lines, you were evacuated, you were a first responder, none of us should be foolish enough to think it did not leave a devastating and long-lasting impact on each of us in some different way. I am seeing it manifested in our firefighters every single day, and it is probably the biggest threat that I see to my staff right now. So we are being very aggressive about how we deal with this. The fire service in Sonoma County has peer support team members on duty every day, so that if you are really struggling with something related to your profession right now, I can match you with a peer who's been there, knows it, gets it, understands it, can put his hand on your shoulder and say, let's just talk through this so we can get to a better place right now. That's huge. I will tell you straight out, I have 2 senior members in my department that planned on working another 4 or 5 years before retirement, but are not going to do another fire season. They just can't see doing it, so they're leaving. So we're seeing physical impacts in our folks. And what is good about this is I think this has been an impact on our industry and the first responder business for many, many, many years. And right, wrong, or indifferent, this has brought the issue to the forefront where we're now finally talking about it. We don't have to be the macho firefighters. We're talking through these issues. We're making sure we have trained therapists that we can connect our folks to who understand the world of public safety. Sort of like Kent said, you've been there, you've seen it, you've felt it. It's a huge issue for us. I appreciate you asking the question because it's often something that's misunderstood. And I do want to speak just quickly to something that Derek alluded to or said quite eloquently, actually, is it's not PTSD just with our first responders. These communities are paralyzed. These communities have been through huge trauma, particularly the communities that Marshall and I both serve. And so, a lot of my role right now is to be a straight talker with them, to keep them well informed, to teach them how to be ready, to teach them how to protect themselves, but also let them know that, again, as Leslie said, God forbid we have another fire like that, we will be here. We will be there. We will be at your house. We will help you. We'll be prepared. We're much better prepared than we were from 2017. Frankly, we're better prepared than we were last year. Mm-hmm. So we learn through these events, and the PTSD issue for everybody is a big issue. And the sooner we can really acknowledge those impacts, we can start the healing process.
Amen. Mic drop. Kent, what about you when you're out on a job? What kind of stuff are you doing to take care of yourself?
That's a loaded question. I try. Listen, if the firefighters leave, I leave. That's number one. I don't mess around with that. And I'm in contact with the firefighters and the newsroom. I had a pretty close call on Hennessy Fire last year. We had you guys would probably know, area ignition. Everything took off at the same time. We were trapped on all 4 sides of the fire. And it was just enough to get out of there without being burned. It was, the fire behavior has changed so much. It's the same, but it's changed. It's just much more, fires are much more aggressive. So you're learning every fire you go to, you learn something new. Like I said, I watch the firefighters. If they're leaving, I leave. I'm not, first of all, there's not a photo there. Second of all, I want to come home to my family. I want to be there for them, or and be around for the rest of my life. I stay in good shape. I walk 15, 20 miles a week. I eat really well now. I'm just more aware of my surroundings. I'm much more aware of the weather. I talk to Marshall once in a while, and if I see firefighters, we talk about the weather. The conversations always turn to weather and always turn to fire behavior. And today we've seen that in Southern California. There's a 500-acre fire down there, evacuating people. It's April, almost May, obviously. And so through Mark and Marshall and all the others, I learned quite a bit from them. I'm not a firefighter, don't want to be a firefighter. I like what I do, but you're learning every step of the way, and what Mark said about mental health, it's so important, because you can get in a situation where if you don't have your head on square, you can get hurt, and you've got to remain very, very calm. There's just no other way. There isn't. I mean, Marshall, you know that, and Mark, you know that too.
So let's take our last few minutes and talk about what's next. And let's talk about it for everybody. Derek, what do you have in the pipeline? It sounds like you were on a shoot today. Are you working on something that you can tell us about?
So I was coming back, as speaking of community. This is a I befriended an artist in Glen Ellen, which also was in the crucible of the 17 fires, named Chuck Gillette. I think he might be watching. Even you might have seen his house if you've driven on Arnold Drive, where it intersects with, I think, Bennett Valley Road. It's got like 1,000 or 100 different kind of repurposed sculptures in the front yard. Chuck is one of, I think, the gems of Sonoma County. A lot of his sculptures feature repurposed remnants from fires, actually, which I guess makes me think about, yes, this has been a heavy conversation. The sort of, I remember at one point filming in 2017, I was just driving up to get kind of burnt landscape. And at one point, I had been doing that for like a week or so. My mom had evacuated, and I got up on the top of one of the hills overlooking Sonoma Valley and just kind of broke down, and it had been, holding it in, and then it kind of all came out. And I think what's so, the reason that there's trauma, that Mark alluded to, is because to see our world literally in flames, it's truly awesome. And to me, it is a perfect representation of our, of our adversarial, destructive relationship with our environment. And it's painful to witness that. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine what it's like to have a job where you have to encounter that all the time, basically. And no human being should have to, but that's the world that we're living in. So I am interested in human stories, certainly, but more and more interested in non-anthropocentric stories, like, the loss of life beyond human life when these things occur is just, I mean, in a way it affects me even more. I feel like we're all kind of guilty, but it's hard to feel like a squirrel or a deer or a mountain lion or a redwood tree is worthy of, and they're not destroying our planet, right? So I'm interested in kind of solutions. I'm working on a project that a kind of more or less about forest defense. That's kind of the new frontier, I think, of life in the West, and all these areas have burned. Especially up in Oregon now, where I kind of split my time, and a lot of salvage logging has started to occur in the name of fire defense. But when we remove, some of the greatest carbon sequestering creatures that we have in the world, trees, it really sets our landscape back, especially because fire is a natural element of Western landscapes. And anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I think we're all kind of struggling to find the words to kind of describe these experiences, so you know, that's kind of what I'm focused on, I guess, is people who are working to preserve our environment, so that we hopefully don't have to you know, have conversations like this as much.
And hey, it's okay not to have the right words. This is hard stuff. That's my job.
That's why we make films, so we don't have to say things.
That's right.
Just show them.
My job to bring you together and give you an opportunity to talk about it and to share how hard it is to articulate these experiences. So Leslie, what about you? What's next for you and James?
Well, as you know, Catherine, I'm more of a weekend warrior filmmaker nowadays, but James does still do it full time. So we are actually working with the Fire District again on a series where we're highlighting the fuels crews that have been working furiously this past year. Really, they work 7 days a week. So we're doing some pieces on those guys and that crew. To support the fire district and getting the word out about that. And then James, you know, again, every day he's shooting or editing something different. He's actually going to be going down to LA next weekend to shoot, to be a gaffer on a short film. So he loves doing that kind of work when he gets to do that sort of stuff. So we always have something in the works. But really, we're just going to try to, you know, find a further avenue or pipeline for this film. So we'll be trying to get it online so that we can have a broader audience see it, you know, to share the story of, you know, how our firefighting personnel really protected our community in 2019.
Excellent. Mr. Porter, how about you?
It's all about drought and fires this year. Unfortunately, it's drought for me. I did some aerials the other day of Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino, and
that's right.
Just so everybody knows, an R-44 is a very uncomfortable helicopter after 2 hours. Yeah, it's all about that and telling that story, and we're really going to be in for it by September. I think we're going to see some really low water levels. I mean, obviously, we all know that Russian River is just going to be a trickle. So yeah, that's going to be my focus this year. I'm then my daily stuff, but basically just to try to get through the summer in one piece and then maybe take a vacation. I don't know.
Oh, good. That sounds great. And all right, fellas here in the bottom right, how are you preparing for what's coming, and any top of mind words of advice for those who might be listening?
Go ahead, Marshall.
I was just going to say, and I'll turn it over to Chief Hine, but I can add something real quick about the emotional stuff, and it kind of is to Derek's point a little bit too, is my son was actually a freshman in 2017, and his high school burned down in 2017, and then with COVID and everything else, he's rarely even been in his high school, and now he's graduating this year. So in the near term, I have one kid that's graduating high school that, you know, had a weird high school years that I never had. So you know, going forward, yeah, we're going to get more into the summer fire season months and the response to fires. But I try to keep my mindset more on where we need to go. And just like we've learned to live with floods and live with earthquakes, you need to learn to live with wildfire. And while we're right now measuring our successes by no one dying, which that is what we need to prioritize, I hope someday we can have a fire burn across the landscape. Maybe it's naturally caused by lightning, and there's no one dies, no homes burn, the fire takes its course, firefighters can safely stop it at convenient locations. Maybe we don't have such the drastic winds. And so, you know, doing the vegetation management, all the standard stuff you guys have heard about building construction, defensible space, fire breaks, things like that. Those things all coming together and keeping our mind on that horizon that we need to get to, and just knowing that it's gonna take a while. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's everyone doing their little piece of it. And then I'll just close by saying the original motivation for doing this documentary, The Kincade, was to basically tell that story for future generations. The interviews were done before the glass fire, before the LNU Lightning Complex, before the Walbridge, before the Myers that affected Sonoma County. It was, hey, this is another once in a lifetime event that happened in our lifetimes, and we're hoping to get a bye or a period of calm, and it did not happen. So now it's kind of more, the motivation is just, hey, fire season is an annual occurrence. We got to learn to live with wildfires. And this is a story of the Kincade Fire, and please take this information and apply it to you and understand it so we can better understand it, hopefully live less in fear of fires and fear of fire season, and be the best prepared we can be. Because trust us, the fire service, we're going to be the best prepared we can be. All public safety agencies are going to be the best prepared we can be, but we can't do it alone. And so it's all of us working together, this sense of community. So I'll turn it over to Chief Hein.
Yeah, I don't know if I can top that. It's pretty eloquent. I will say that, you know, in 40 years of doing this, the bulk of my wildfire experience was really driving 12 hours in a fire engine to Southern California, because that's where the fires were happening. You know, how many years have we all lived where we would turn on CNN during the summertime and think, oh my goodness, these poor people in Southern California, look what they're going through. And it's kind of alluded to in the early moments of the panel discussion. I don't know what label to put on it, but I can tell you things are different. And what used to occur with weather patterns, with fire behavior in Southern California is now occurring here in the middle of the state and right over the top of us. So it is about learning as much as we can as citizens and as professionals in the industry. It's about us all working cohesively and collaboratively together. I think all of you that are in the media industry play such a critical role for us in the public safety world, helping to communicate the message, whether it's through sight, through sound, through print. Getting the word out, as Ken alluded to, what was it really like standing in the foothill neighborhood of Windsor? That's an important message to share for generations to come. What was it like in the geysers in the middle of the night when the wind's blowing 70 miles an hour and there's a fire on the ground? That's an important message to share. And so I think that that's really critical. And I would leave it with this. There will be fires. There will be fires this summer. You know, I hope that we don't see the devastation that we've experienced in years past, but we will be prepared. We have better technology, more situational awareness tools available to us, more live time data coming in. Our fire camera network is robust now. We can see these things early on. Community can log into the same system of cameras and say the same things that we as professionals see. Prepare yourselves. If you need help, we're here to help you. And we really are geared around being proactive. So give us a call. We're happy to help and help you prepare as well. But I appreciate the work that's gone into this, Leslie in particular, and Marshall. What a critical tool to capture historically, but probably more importantly, to share a message for those that may not have experienced these events personally. And if this film, as I'm quite confident it will do, saves a life into the next fire season, then we have all risen to the challenge and really done something really well here.
Well said. So, Marshall, could you tell us where the funds are going to go to? We're making a call to action for the community tonight to donate directly to Wine Country to the Rescue. Marshall, what are these funds going to do?
So funds donated. Well, initially this video, the Kincade video, was funded by donations, so it'll replenish that pot of money that then's used for doing proactive and preventative efforts amongst various fire agencies in northern Sonoma County and also with the Sonoma County Fire District in this case. So it could be a myriad of things. Community chipper days, community fire preparedness signs like you saw have been installed and partially funded the Mark West Springs community fire preparedness signs. So it's stuff for the betterment of the community to prevent fires, to get people prepared. And this video fit in that vein. So that's where the funds will be used for the prevention, preparedness. There's also the citizens organized to prepare for emergencies, the COPE groups, the CERT groups, the resiliency groups that do exist. This is a source of funding that we can help them distribute information, maybe sponsor something that's a benefit of the community. So it all gets put right back into our community. And it's a great partnership to have with all the fire agencies, regardless of patch, we're all working together. So
excellent. Thank you. Well, listen, in our last few seconds together, I just want to say, Well, first of all, thank you to all of our panelists for being here. The films are available. They're packaged in a playlist together. They're available through the end of the festival, which is running through Sunday, May 2nd. We encourage everybody to go take a look. And then Leslie, Derek, please keep us on your mailing list so we can keep our folks posted on the life of your films and where to find them next. Also, thank you to the Alexander Valley Film Society sponsors and donors. We have a free ticket option for this set of films. It's an On Your Honor Northern Sonoma County resident ticket price of $0.0. So there's no excuse. Everybody needs to go and check out the film. But back to our panelists, thank you. It's so important for this community to have these touch points as we move through this journey together about not only what's happening behind the scenes, but how we make meaning of it, how we continue to care for each other and prepare and come back to the table and talk about what we learned and what to do better next time. So thank you all. Be safe out there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. And we'll see you at the movies, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Catherine.
Bye.
Thank you.